the wealth of renewable energy that Africa has and put a number to that, we would be the richest continent in the world. We have hydropower, we have geothermal. There is no continent that is as rich as Africa in regard to energy. How do we use that as the benefit?
Where our renewable energy and related industries, especially solar panel installation, wind farms, battery techs and maintenance, etc., will create millions of jobs for the African youth population.
Hello and welcome to State of Africa. I'm Jeff Motte, and today we are turning the spotlight on one of the defining issues of our time, Africa's path to clean energy. Now, despite contributing less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, Africa is already the most climate vulnerable region in the world, and this is according to the United Nations Environment Programme. But from renewable energy to climate-smart agriculture, the continent is finding African-led solutions that turn climate responsibility into climate opportunity. Now, joining me for this conversation, we have Wangari Moshiri, Director of Africa at the Global Wind Energy Council, and Fatou Dieng, the founder of Clean Earth Gambia, a dynamic panel to unpack what a just transition really means for the continent. Wangari, I want to start with you. When you talk about the Global Wind Energy Council, what is it? What is it doing? What impact does it seek to achieve on the continent? And of course, as we're talking about, around the globe as well.
So the Global Wind Energy Council is the industrial association globally for anything wind energy, whether you're developed, whether you're manufacturing turbines, whether you're providing services to wind farms. All these companies are our members, and we're about 2,000, over 2,000 members that are within the GWEC team. And therefore, we are the voice of the industry globally, speaking with one voice to governments, to financiers, to policymakers to really help them understand wind energy and help them embrace it. And so my role as the Africa director is to do this within Africa. We've seen that there's a lot of adoption of renewable energy like solar, like hydro, but wind seems to be less understood. And so we've decided to take this very rich membership base and the knowledge that we have and help share and capacity build governments and others across the continent.
Thank you so much for that, Wangari. Quickly, I'll move to you, Fatou. Talking about Clean Earth Gambia, what is your organization doing in the Gambia, and of course the impact it seeks to achieve not only in your country but across the continent as well?
So we are a youth-led environmental NGO. We have over the past years really been able to focus on advocacy, on education, on policy, as well as restoration and nature-based solutions. Over the past years, through our engagements, working with the government of the Gambia and UN institutions like UNICEF, UNFPA, and UNDP, we have been able to actually impact over 40,000 people in the Gambia through our advocacy efforts, and also have planted over 35,000 trees across the country, because Gambia is one of the least developed countries at the crossroad of the environmental crisis. I am from Banjul, the Gambia, which is the capital city, and we are at risk of sea level rise. And over the past years, we partnered with the Banjul City Council to actually plant over 14,000 trees across the Banjul River to actually help in curbing the rise in sea level. We also last year hosted the first ever National Children and Youth Conference on climate change, bringing together children and young people across the country to actually engage our policymakers and also our government to really ensure that our national climate policies and programs are actually youth and children sensitive. And also with our focus on climate justice, we've been empowering young women to actually build their leadership as well as their knowledge on the intersection of gender and climate, and also providing them resources and tools for them to continue to engage their communities and also build their resilience. And we've also worked with farmers, especially women farmers, providing them with skills and knowledge to actually be able to engage in climate sensitive agriculture, as they are also one of the groups that are mainly dependent on the natural environment. So in summary, we have over the past years worked on different thematic areas and have impacted thousands of people across the country. And obviously, our goal is to make sure that we upskill and scale up our work across the continent to make sure that there is more focus on climate justice in our climate advocacy, in our climate implementation, as well as climate adaptation work to ensure that young people are put at the heart of the climate conversations, as well as vulnerable communities that continue to be the most disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis.
The continent is indeed in need of a lot of industrialization. How do we do that and move forward in a climate smart way? Because you can see the gap that's there. And these are the rooms that you're in talking about this. How should the continent think about that particular aspect?
What has really happened in the past is that the energy systems have been very extractive when it comes to Africa. When you think of the oil, big oil companies coming into Africa to take out fossil fuels, to take out coal, it's never been a way to help develop the country. Even if that was the story that we were all told, that this developing your oil will help you develop. And when you look at the countries that have had oil, in fact, it's been more of a curse than really a support in terms of developing their own growth. And so when it comes to this conversation around a just energy transition, we need to ensure that the people who need the energy the most, and 600 million of the people who don't have access to electricity, 600 million of them are in Africa, then we need to ensure that we're giving them the cheapest, best energy that they can have access to, and that is what rare renewables comes in. And so if there is access to energy, let's say somebody has a solar panel on their roof and they're able now to power and light their houses, or they're able to work longer in the market, or they're able to be more productive just as a factor of having energy as an enabler for the commercial activities they want to do, or for anything that they want to do, then that is the development that we're really talking about. So when you come to discussing a transition in Africa, the transition is not from fossil fuels to renewables, but in some cases it's from no energy to renewables. And so ensuring that that is really done fairly. Now, coming to your question around industrialization, and when I think of powering the continent for 600 million Africans, it's not going to be enough for us to say, I'm going to buy a panel from China. I'm going to send all my money out to China to acquire a solar panel or a wind turbine or a battery just so that I can have access to electricity. That's not going to work. And it's going to only replicate the same extractive systems that we've seen in the fossil fuel industry, taking money from the least poor and charging them the most just to access energy. What we need to be doing is saying, how can we start to manufacture these technologies within the continent? How do we start to bring industrialization, and dare I call it green industrialization, into the continent and say, let's power industries, let's bring data centers, let's create jobs. And because we have so much abundance in solar and wind and hydro, and then we also have the critical minerals that go into technologies like batteries, it's a big opportunity to industrialize the right way without it being extractive. It can really be a real path to development for Africa. And I think that's the way we need to start looking at this just and equitable transition.
I want us to move from, where it's discussed in terms of policy and systems that needs to be done, and go to the ground where Fatou is, where she's engaging community in this particular front, not only educating them, but for those who know, giving them the tools needed to actually move forward in terms of practice. When you actually start these conversations, Fatou, where do you start from so that they can understand the import of what they're doing, how important it is to them, and what they need to do moving forward? Because it really needs to start at an individual level, a family level, then community, and get the ripple from there. How do you start this conversation to make it really go home, get to those particular people as well?
For someone like me, at a young age, I saw how the impact of climate change was affecting my family. My father is a farmer, and I saw how the impacts of climate change actually impacted his agricultural yield. And this is the same for many families in the Gambia. Gambia is a country where about 70% of our rural population actually depend on agriculture as their main source of income and livelihood. So for someone like me, I was inspired due to climate impact on my family. And I took individual actions before I even set up Clean Out Gambia. I started being involved in community outreach. When there were beach cleanups, I'll join. When there were school outreach, I'll join. Even though at that age, I didn't understand most of the terminologies, or I didn't understand most of the things that were happening. And so for me, this is the approach that we continue to use in our engagements and in our activities across the Gambia and beyond. Because part of the work that we do is a lot of awareness. Because a lot of people see climate impacts, but some of them do not understand that it is climate change that is causing some of these things happening. For instance, on the issue of the heat wave that has been exacerbating over the past years. You will sit with family members and communities and they will complain, oh, it's so hot today, or it's been so hot in the past few days. But they wouldn't attribute this to climate and all. So we realized that, advocacy at the individual level, at the community level, at the schools is something that's very crucial. And that's what we've been doing. For example, Gambia is also one of the countries that still do not have environmental education in their basic and elementary school curriculum. So what we do is actually go to these schools to actually more or less provide a supplement to train these young people so they understand what energy transition means to them, what climate justice means to them, etc., while the government makes plans to actually incorporate environmental education in the system. So how do we share, or what do we share? Because some of the panelists or my co-panelists have actually mentioned how important just transition is for the continent, and also how urgent it is, because we continue to see how Africa as a continent is actually blessed with so many natural resources, but we still haven't been able to harness these resources that we have. So we need to make sure that at least when we are having conversations, we also bring to these people the opportunities that are there for just transition, or the opportunities that are there for industrialization, because it will create job opportunities for them. They will understand that, and also it will actually help them actually get out of poverty or lift them out of poverty, and also will help improve their lives and their livelihoods. So sometimes these conversations, when we're having it, if we also narrate it or code it in a way that it also tells them that when we take action, it will also provide economic opportunities for you, it's going to provide health benefits for you, it actually makes them listen more, especially in terms of how we can get more people involved in the just transition, but also in ensuring that they are more involved in terms of accessing opportunities. Because again, I was reading a report from IRENA and the African Development Bank, especially around the renewable energy market analysis that they did for Africa and its region. And it's really shocking to see that we have an estimated, like, if countries actually take action and actually invest more in green jobs or in just transition, it will actually help to accelerate their energy development by like 6.4% in their GDP, and it will also create an overall employment of 3.5% by 2050 for countries in Africa. And also we see how this sector, or the renewable energy sector, could also help to create up to 3.3 million of like direct green jobs in Africa by 2030 if countries are really taking more action and really investing more on it, because there's so much potential for that. We do a lot of work underground to create awareness, to engage all governments to make sure that there are more policies that are climate sensitive, etc. But also it's really important that we are communicating to these people about the opportunities that are available and really what they could get from our transition to a more just economy, to more just societies, as well as to just more equitable societies in this transition as well.
I believe that's a fitting point to take our break on the show. We take a short break. We are back on the other side with more. This is State of Africa. Don't go too far.
Yeah, definitely there's drastic change in climate. Our dry seasons are much longer, and the places where we're experiencing wet seasons, the wet seasons are also longer.
I've been in Nairobi for a while, and for the past 2 months, I can say it was like a cold climate, and it was also a time or a period whereby the last 1 month the kids were at home and it was okay, but now it's kind of hot, and due to that global change or the climate change.
Welcome back to State of Africa. Now, before the break, we set the stage with the scale of Africa's climate challenge. Now, let's dive deeper with our panelists. What practical steps are governments, investors, and communities taking today to build more resilient economies? whether through wind corridors, green industrial zones, or grassroots climate action? Let's continue that particular conversation as I get back to my panel this particular episode. And us to pick it from where we left off and quickly want to get to you, Fatu, on this, because as we talk about solutions and how we can move forward, it's a critical part of the conversation to see what we can do at whatever level we are of society, organization. And I want to talk about climate smart agriculture because indeed it's also a very key component when it comes to not only food security but also this particular transition. How can women and youth farmers be placed at the center of these transition, not being brought in, marginally, to be part of the conversation at the periphery, but really driving this change and transition from the center? What would you say about that? How do we make this happen practically?
How do we put women, young people at the center of this transition? For me, what I always say is, first of all, it's just about the political will. It's about how governments are actually really very much interested in putting in policies that actually address the challenges of these groups, but also how much the government is willing, or our governments are willing to invest to support these groups of people and communities. And I recently did a lecture at the European Alba Forum. Let our governments actually provide resources to women farmers. Africa is a continent where we still have a huge proportional number of women farmers still without access to land because of the patriarchal society and because of the laws that makes it difficult for these women to actually access resources the same as other community members. In 2021, we actually led a really big campaign because women farmers in Gunjur were actually at the risk of losing the farmlands that they were using for over 30 years. And the proceeds of their activities were what they were using to send their children to school, to actually build their lives and also their livelihoods. And it was really unfortunate because when we heard about this situation from the young people in Gunjur, we had to actually use our social media platforms and brought to the attention of people, especially the media, policymakers, etc., about what was happening to these women farmers. Because these women at the beginning were not talking about what was happening because they were scared of the impact or the repercussion of what would happen if they speak or talk about the challenges. And funnily, these farmlands were actually being taken by a corporation that actually wanted to extend or expand their activities. This corporation was already damaging the environment through overfishing and also through pollution, affecting our river and the resources we had in the river, and then now wanted to go further and actually expand their land size so that they can continue the exploitation on our environment. So with that, we had to go all out, and we did a massive campaign. And this was really able to get the attention of different stakeholders. And at the end of the day, with the support of lawyers, etc., these women were actually able to maintain their farmlands. So how do we make sure things like this do not happen again, where women actually continue to be at risk of losing their lands, or even some women do not have access to land? The second thing also, for young people that have been in this space, we continue to see how there are so many challenges in terms of the low participation and representation of women in decision-making processes. And as a young person that has been a decision maker, that has served or that serves as a negotiator for the government of the Gambia on ACE, that is Action for Climate Empowerment and Gender, to the UNFCCC, I've seen how important it is for young people to be in spaces like this, because we get to bring our first-hand experiences and our first-hand knowledge in spaces like this, which can actually influence not only policies but also implementation.
What can we do as a continent to spur innovation within our own continental border so as to make sure we're the ones who are coming with these particular innovations instead of simply importing these solutions onto the continent? What do we need to do to, spur that innovation in Africa?
I think the energy sector is changing a lot. So before we were talking about a solar panel on a roof powering a house. Now we have cars that have solar panels on them. We used to talk about bikes that are powered by fuel. Now you have battery swapping systems where a bike can come and change change the battery in a few matter of seconds. So the whole shift and the innovation around this renewable energy sector is really moving quite a bit. And with the introduction of things like AI, as I mentioned before, mini grids or integrated mini grids, energy storage evolving, green hydrogen, there's a whole manner of different aspects of this that are now going to be quite important for us to start to consider. And so when you now bring in the question of how can we ensure that these innovations are happening in country and not happening as a matter of fact of us buying again, exporting materials and buying back more expensive materials, we need to really involve academia in this and say, how can academia partner with industry to really continue to do R&D? A lot of the Chinese companies, the largest wind and solar companies in the world, are actually investing about 10 to 12% of their profits, not just of their revenues, into R&D, because they realize how important it is to continue to innovate. And even if we do bring manufacturing into Africa, we don't want to start manufacturing legacy technology that is 10 years old when people have moved on to new, faster, better technology. So it's important that industry partners with academia, that everyone's talking to each other, but also, and as Fatu said, governments need to also take an active role in investing in the research and development, in innovation arms, in universities, in ensuring that students are also doing research on what is the next trends coming up.
Fatu, I want to come to you because you have said you've been fortunate enough to be in some of those rooms where negotiation has been taking place. What do you think, and this I know is a big one, so you can give us your experience and what you think some of those insights could work. How do you think Africa should be positioning in itself when it comes to global negotiations, when it comes to issues like climate finance, so it can get its fairness when it comes to climate finance as well? What should the continent be looking at when it gets into these negotiation rooms?
Yes, we have been the continent that continues to be one of the most impacted, even though we are contributing the least to global greenhouse gas emission. But we cannot continue to position ourselves as victims. We also need to position ourselves as a continent that has so much resources where we could actually build solid and long-term partnerships with external partners, where we are not only going to be seen as continents that are actually receiving debt, or a continent that continues to be exploited, but we need to position ourselves as a hub for not only innovation, but also for the energy transition, given the immense resources that we have as a continent, which is not tapped into at all. So as someone that has actually been a negotiator since 2017, mainly following education and also gender-related issues, I've also closely been following conversations around climate financing. And to be honest with you, since Copenhagen, where actually governments committed to the 100 billion climate financing every single year, it's been a challenge because we cannot even achieve the 100 billion climate financing targets, especially by the global north. So it makes me think, especially in relation to the issue of climate financing, how countries, especially those in the global north, are serious about ensuring there is climate financing through adaptation, loss and damage, among others. But most importantly, how long do we continue to push for more action from countries that actually continue to emit the most to the global climate crisis? And this is where Africa comes in and how we position ourselves. Because we've been talking about moving and phasing down fossil fuel, which is still a challenge because some countries at some point, I don't want to name names, but we've seen some major economies that have actually said that they are going to phase down fossil fuel or phase out of fossil fuel completely. But now we are seeing them changing the languages in these negotiations, saying now instead of phase down, or they are going to maybe slow down or things like that. So they always use the technicalities or use the terminologies to really be able shift attention and focus on the conversations on things that are most relevant. So I think for me, what I think Africa needs to do first of all is how we position ourselves to attract investors, to attract funding that will actually help us utilize the resources that we have already and be able to help us really be able to upskill our youth demographics so they can access jobs and employment opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Fatu. Wangari, I want to come to you as well as we're bringing this to a close. I mean, even as you go around the world and champion this particular issue of wind energy and coalesce players together, I'm sure there's a vision that keeps you moving, and this could be what you envision for 2030, 5 years from now, when you're looking at progress that has been made, and you're looking at the big one, probably even 2050. What is success from your lens looking like when it comes to specifically Africa and this transition as well?
I think for me, this was really outlined well in the Nairobi Declaration, moving renewable energy targets from 56 gigawatts to 300 gigawatts is going to be quite a big feat, but I think it's also a great opportunity. So for me, I do see by 2030 that there will be a lot more wind and solar in our grids. I think also there'll be a lot more discussions around how data and AI are really driving these sectors and are being a core part of this, and being the technology innovation around this is really being embraced by Africans, as we've seen. I think the other thing that's going to be there is that I want to see a lot more processing of our own minerals. So we have a lot of minerals on the continent. Sorry, there's someone here. We have a lot of minerals on the continent, and the minerals on the continent are now just being extracted out. How do we now make sure that those minerals are now being processed within the continent?
As we wrap up this edition of State of Africa, one thing is clear. Africa's just transition is not only about energy. It's about equity, opportunity, and leadership on the global stage. From Ethiopia to the Gambia, from wind power to community-driven adaptation, the solutions are being shaped right here on the continent. A big thank you to my panelists, Wangari Mushiri, Alelen Alenyehu, and Fatou Jeng for their insights. And a big thank you for watching as well. I'm Jeff Mote, and this is State of Africa. Until next time, goodbye.